Let's do it again. Hello. Sorry, I was mute. Yeah, that's the good the on air. So this is show me your code, and it's the second time I do it. Walter was alone the first time. We bring it back, and we have Dan with us from the OpenTelemetry community. I'm trying to connect people that I know will benefit from having a chat. And now that we are all home, I'm just streaming the conversation, hoping to have something useful. Daniel, tell us a bit about yourself and your involvement with OpenTelemetry.
Okay. Well, hello. I'm Daniel Dyla. I'm a software engineer at Dynatrace, which is a software intelligence company. I've been working on OpenTelemetry now for about 6 months. I'm the main co-maintainer of the JS, as well as a contributor to the OpenTelemetry specification. I'm still somewhat new to the project in terms of, I've only been working on it for I've been working on it full time. So that's what I got.
Arthur, do you have something for us?
I have to screen share, go to screen share, or just presenting myself?
Then yourself, so.
Nice hi to everybody. I'm Walter. I'm a solution architect in Corley. This is an Italian company that is providing help and support to deploy application in AWS, migrating to the cloud. And we are an AWS-centric company, so we work a lot with all the AWS stack to go to the cloud smoothly.
So let me share with you why we are doing this call. So first, I know Walter thinks like this almost like my first day of job, because we worked together for a long time, and I knew that he's interested on observe the microservices he developed with his team, and it's always hard to figure out how the request flows into the system. And we spoke like 2 years ago maybe about open tracing, and we tried to do something with open tracing, but it didn't really come together smoothly. Early 2 months ago, I delivered a workshop about observability during the CloudConf workshop in Italy. We weren't able to get outside already, so we made it online. And Dan helped me to make the part that was made in JavaScript to work, because I'm not a JavaScript developer, and he was very kind, supporting me during my journey. So I decided to, try to connect those two people together and see if we can, something good out of it. So Dan, can you explain to us a little bit about OpenTelemetry itself for people that doesn't know about it, and also something about how the designed and what's the good part of it, and how the library itself is gonna proceed from now that it's released in beta. So what do we expect from here to stable, and when it will happen?
Yeah, so I'll start with an overview of sort of what OpenTelemetry is to begin with. Telemetry is a observability framework, a little bit different than a tracing tool like, because open tracing was obviously focused, but OpenTelemetry also includes metrics, and recently we've started of logs also, which are, you've probably heard them called the 3 pillars of observability before. It's the most fully flushed use case at the moment, but metrics is not far behind, and I'm very excited to see all 3 are fully realized. Itself is split into what we call special interest groups. the specification, which is one special SIG, and then we also have like the JavaScript SIG, which develops the JavaScript implementation, and we have the Go SIG, which develops the Go, and so on. And then within each of those implementations, you typically have the API and the SDK as two separate packages, with the idea being that libraries like a database driver or something like that can depend on the OpenTelemetry API, telemetry API methods, and then the end user or the end application developer can plug in an SDK and then collect all the exported tracing data and send it to whatever tracing backend that they use, Zipkin or Dynatrace or. So that's sort of the way the overall project is structured. Specifically for JavaScript, we have a repo pattern. So we have an API package, and then we have a bunch of different packages that all make up the SDK. A metrics package, and then packages for each instrumentation or plugin, which actually are what patches the libraries together, tracing data. Not too many libraries have built-in support for OpenTelemetry, so we have to patch them, which is what a lot of our packages are doing. And then we recently, actually working on this, started moving all of the plugins into their own repo, out of the main repo. And the idea behind that is to like a lower barrier to entry. Somebody, and they can communicate, they can contribute it to the contrib repo, which is what we're calling it, and there's a lower barrier to entry there than there is for the core repo. And then eventually we hope to have like a defined sort of upgrade path where repo becomes popular or stable to the point that we're happy with it and promote it to the core repo.
So it will, like you are splitting the monorepo, but in some way, some of the plugins will stay in the, because I thought, like the first time I saw the monorepo, it was clear for me where to go and where to look at. So will you stay, or are you moving everything outside?
Okay. The HTTP and HTTPS plugins are definitely staying because they patch like the standard library modules, so it definitely makes sense to keep them. And then I think gRPC will stay. The XHR plugin for the web will also stay. There may be others that we keep, but for now, those are going to be the ones in the main repo. You're right. Before, it was nice that everything was in one place. It was easy to find. There was a big list, and hoping not to lose too much of that. We will still list all of the plugins with links to the contrib repo. Thing to be fairly easy to find. And we do have the OpenTelemetry registry. I don't know if you've seen that. Telemetry.io webpage to the registry where you should be able to say DB plugin. So you go there and you search for MongoDB, and it will say, okay, here's the JavaScript implementation of the MongoDB instrumentation, and here's the Go version. And that should be an easy way to find instrumentations also. Okay,
yeah, thank you. Yeah, I saw it, and it's very convenient. So I think it's super valuable. But yeah, as I say, like the impact I had when I saw everything inside the same repo made the onboarding super clear. So I'm glad to know that something is going to go outside because it's reasonable, but we will still get the flavor of having everything in one place. Walter, can you tell us a bit about like your idea of tracing, like why you would like to use it, and your first impression with the OpenTelemetry one?
Yeah, my first attempt with tracing this was with OpenTracing and Zipkin, And what we did at that time is, at the end, coupling the tracing with our source code. We separated those things using events and those kind of stuffs, but at the end, we tracing embedded in our code base. Thanks to the OpenTelemetry strategy about the integration, we can use OpenTelemetry strategy to integrate all the tracing stuffs around the library and base project to the code directly in our business logic. So from the first impression, the implementation is so clear, so it's very simple to integrate. It's very simple to get rid of it when we don't need it in the production environment. We want to use it mainly during our also development of microservices and integration testing in order to understand what is going on in our infrastructure. So the simplicity of implementation and the integration is what we really love about this project. And we just need instrumenting libraries. So it's a very, very big, beautiful project. It's a very incredible project.
Yeah, just about that and about the instrumentation. When we pair on the code the first time, you quickly discovered that the library that you were using, Mongoose, wasn't supported by the OpenTelemetry. So if you would like to screen share and tell us about how you approach the problem and how you try to solve it, I think other people will benefit from your experience, because it's something very common to do. Like at some point you will find something that is not instrumented, and you.
Yeah, our first impression is to use the MongoDB instrumenting library that is already in place. And finally, Mongoose is not using MongoDB library itself, sadly, and it implements all the things by itself. So the MongoDB instrumentation library is not valuable for Mongoose. So at the end, we start our internal project. So about integrating the instrumenting library is interesting because there is no connection with our source code. So what we have done is create a new project. Is organized in the same way that is organized the MongoDB and the MySQL instrumenting library that we found on the registry about OpenTelemetry.io webpage. So all projects are open source about OpenTelemetry. It's very simple to sneak around and understand how they implement the multi-patching strategy and how it works in fact. So thanks to the base plugin structure that we can inherit from the OpenTelemetry core, we can extend the telemetry, we can extend that class so we can implement our instrumentation library. And we have to implement two methods, the patch methods and the patch methods. So the interface is super simple. And during the patch method, we have just to wrap the end library methods. So for example, in Mongoose, I want to wrap the save, the remove, and the exec method. There are effectively all the function about inserting rows in MongoDB, removing rows, and execute any kind of query in MongoDB by Mongoose. So we have just to patch those methods. And thanks to this project, this is Shimmer, we can substitute the original library method with a proxy before the final library method. So when I want to patch, for example, the execution query, I can wrap it. So I can start a new span. Maybe I can also increase the font width. So we can just, when someone calls the exec method in the MongoDB library, wrap that method with our proxy. So we can start a new span, introducing the model name. For example, I want to query the product model. And the operation that I want to use in this example is the query execute, but can be a find one or any kind of other query method. I can add a lot of different attributes that I want to trace, add as attribute of a trace, of a span, sorry. And then when I prepare the span, I can execute the original method from the Mongoose library and receive the response from this method. So when I receive the response, I can stop the span, so I can close the span, and it will be sent library directly to the collector. So if I watch what is happen for example, Jaeger UI, what I have when I call a method, for example, a get operation on view v1 element, I can see different tracing, different spans from, for example, Express instrumentation library. Then I find these two, the product find method is this one, and the other one is another query, is the count document. So we can add our tracing and instrumentation span. And if I open this one, I can find also all the information that I provide the library. So I can, for example, see the options about my query. I want to skip no one element. I want to limit my query to 25 elements. I want to see the port that I'm connecting to. I want to see the host, the collection that I'm querying, this kind of stuff. So I can integrate my span along with the auto span and other instrumenting libraries. So it's very, very simple to use. And if I watch my source base, my code, for example, this is the get method, is this one, the implementation. There is no spans opening, no tracing information in my source code, because the only thing that I have to do is bootstrapping the project, introducing the enabling different plugins. So for example, I want to enable the Mongoose instrumentation library. So I just add this configuration in my entry point of my application, and everything goes smoothly without doing anything else. This is a very brief introduction about what we have done with the OpenTelemetry project. More deeply?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. I mean, I was impressed when I saw your implementation at first because you use the Shimmer project that is, I'm not a JavaScript developer, so for me it's like a magic. Did you use it like before, or is something new? And Dan, can you tell us about how did you find it or whatever? Because it's very cool. It makes a huge difference compared with other languages.
Well, yeah, so we use Shimmer mostly because OpenCensus was using Shimmer before, and a lot of our implementations come from OpenCensus. They're ported from the other project. I could have said that earlier. OpenTelemetry is like the merged effort of OpenTracing and OpenCensus. So that's where a lot of the code has come from. But yeah, Shimmer is a great library. The implementation of it is really simple. If you look at it on GitHub, it fit on a single screen. So I appreciate libraries that can be easily understood and then feel so magic when you use them. It's really awesome. But yeah, I like Shimmer a lot, and we've had really good luck with it. So I'm glad that Walter was also able to use it, and hopefully you found it to be relatively straightforward.
Yeah, it's when I watched the first plugin implementation from the OpenTelemetry, I immediately realized that it's super simple instrumenting any kind of library. This is the major things that move me to the OpenTelemetry, because it is simple to instrumenting something is the key for me to succeed with the tracing. Problem before, because we are coupling our implementation with the tracing. So the fact that it's very transparent, very smooth, the instrumenting methods is something that is super useful to me. What we want to do now with the tracing project. So.
Yeah, and one thing I did want to mention, when you were showing your code, I noticed you only patched like save and exec, and there was one other, and like that's also like. What we try to do is patch what I think of as like the lowest level component, find methods and the find one and find all and everything, and they all eventually call. So if you patch exec, you just get everything essentially for free. And that's what we try to do also as much as possible when we write plugins. So I was really glad to see that you did that, because really don't have much code here, and it does a lot. So it's to patch every individual method, it would be so much more work. So I'm glad that you found that. And then the extension of that principle is, for instance, we patched the HTTP standard library module. So if you use like Axios or GOT or any other request libraries like that, they all use the HTTP standard library modules, so they will all work without needing their own instrumentations. Patch like the lowest level component is always something that we try to do, and I was glad to see that you followed that principle perfectly.
Good to know that.
Yeah, Walter, I asked this question to you already offline, so I'm gonna do it again. So what do you have in your working environment that has to be instrumented next?
I'm really interested to instrument the AWS SDK, as mentioned before, because we use it a lot. We are what AWS call a cloud boutique, because we are a tiny company. We use AWS a lot, and we support our custom development with AWS. So what I'm really interested in instrumenting is the AWS library that I think it is already instrumented by the HTTPS module, but we want probably to trace more information. We have to start with it. We don't discover a lot around the AWS instrumenting for now, but this is what we want to instrument. This is something I am interested in.
Dan, do you have any strategy for people that will try to instrument their code about how to approach this job? Like, do you think that Shimmer is just the way to go, and you can start with that because you can magically do whatever you want from the outside? Or do you think that, or do you know about cases where going deeper and having to pass around the tracer is actually a required methodology?
So I don't know of any cases where you can't patch it from the outside, but definitely it's not ideal. The ideal case would be that Mongoose, the OpenTelemetry API directly into their library. We would know if they ever changed like an internal implementation or something like that. They would also update their API calls, and we would know the instrumentation would essentially always be correct. For now, the plugins kind of depend on breaking changes that break the instrumentation. And we try to write them in a way that is defensive against that, but you can only do so much. So when you're patching something from the outside, it's an imperfect strategy, but for now, that's what we have to do until libraries start building it in. I know there have been some efforts to try to against a couple of libraries, but for the most part, library authors are waiting for ability before building it in, which totally makes sense. But in the future, we hope that that's the case. So that would be having individual instrumentation plugins all over the place if libraries would build in support.
Yeah, there is definitely a friction in the community about onboarding a telemetry library, an instrumentation library. I think mainly comes from the instability of the ecosystem that we had like during the last couple of years when we keep changed name of the projects to get the same outcome. But yeah, I really hope that OpenTelemetry will be the next rebranding that we will see at least for a couple of years.
I know a lot of people, a lot of library authors that built in open tracing support don't necessarily appreciate the rug being pulled out from underneath them. But I promise in the end, it will be better. It's better to have, and open tracing competing before, it's much better if all those people work together. They're trying to solve the same problem. They're trying to do it in an open source way. There's no reason for them to work against each other. So better to have a single community. For most of the language implementations, open tracing and open census bridges, where if you call open tracing APIs, open telemetry. So any modules that have open tracing built in should work with OpenTelemetry as well. So for the meantime, that's a good stopgap measure, I guess you'd say.
Definitely. Walter, do you? I know that you write tests for everything. So do you have something to show us for this project, and or how do you approach this issue, like testing when writing this library?
Yeah, testing the library is another thing that is very simple. This is something that's amazing because in order to test it, I just integrate I integrated all things that I want to check. So I can connect to MongoDB, a running MongoDB instance, so that I spin locally on my laptop using Docker, and connect directly to a running MongoDB. For every test, I can connect and I can disconnect from the MongoDB, and then before each test, I can insert data inside the MongoDB. I can create indexes that I need to check different error conditions. And at the end of the single test, I can drop the collection. So for every test, I create in database and I clear from database after test. Thanks to exporters that I can work in memory without having also Jaeger and very difficult infrastructure, we can process all the span directly in memory. So during the test procedures, it's very simple to check for assertion, the span is correctly created and this kind of stuff, so it's correctly linked together. So thanks to the memory exporter, we can have just the MongoDB, and I can execute my test case. For tests is very, very simple. I can start a root span, then I can get the tracer and execute any mongoose command. Executed, I can get the span from the memory exporter and check, for example, that the B statement should be empty, the model name should be user, the query type should be saved because I call the save operation. To another test, and for example, I don't want to use the save operation using promises, but I want to use callbacks. I can do practically the same things. So I change the way I use the mongoose method. Again, in another way, the same piece of code, and so on. So I can check, for example, when I want to save and the save operation goes in error, I want just to span, for example, understand that I have the status code equally to canonical code unknown, and I want to see that the attribute is Mongo error code is this particular error code. So I can go on with all the methods that I want to check and test. Usually verify our integration, so I don't need to develop the plugin directly in my application. So I just use the final product in my application. I mean, I develop the plugin completely in isolation. I just need a MongoDB instance. Then I want to check multiple find operations. So for example, I can do a promisal with different procedures to get the finished span. I want to be, this span should be a couple, and I want to test that the first one is find, the match I wanted the statement is this one, and this kind of stuff. So testing the library is a very straightforward procedure, is very simple to do. I just start a root span, I get the tracer, I execute my query and verify that the span is in place. exporter, I don't need also Jaeger or Zipkin or these kind of stuff. So I can use directly the memory exporter and check.
Yeah, I really like when packages like take care about exporting like a framework that can be used for testing. Like it's something that in Go, I work in Go a lot, and it's common. And there are also a lot of like system application like databases made in Go, so it's very easy to have a mock that you can use. And yeah, I'm glad that the JavaScript library is also doing that. So, Walter, I will leave you a homework for now. Just think about one or two questions we would like to. You have like the OpenTelemetry maintainer here, so just think about what you missed or what you want from now and see if he has something for you. Dan, in the meantime, I have another question for you. As I said before, like you and other maintainers for other libraries, like the Python one and the Go one, they all released the beta. So what's the plan from now and when we're gonna see a stable release?
Okay, so that's we'll say that's being actively discussed right now. Really know exactly what the time frame will be. I hope to be general availability in a few months, sometime during the summer, I think is the hope. Obviously, no promises right now, but we hope to have a fairly short beta cycle. We're really just making sure that the project is stable right now, because we want to make sure when we go to GA, this is ready to be used in production workloads at whatever scale you're at. Absolutely sure that it's not breaking anything. And that includes, when I say not breaking anything, applications are broken and throwing errors. We need to make sure that they break in the same way that they used to break. If we wrap a function and it throws an error, we need to make sure that we're throwing the error the exact same way that it would before. Use errors for control flow and things like that. So we want to make sure in complex environments, when you enable OpenTelemetry, it should not change any behavior in your system at all. And that's something that we're very adamant about. So that's the primary focus of is making sure that everything is really rock solid and stable, and having a period of API stability where we can build a set of plugins that they're ready to be used when we go to general availability. So that library of available modules, so that when people have fairly complex environments, they should be able to instrument, if not everything, then at least their most important components, like their database calls or RPC calls, and things like that.
Is auto-instrumentation something that you have in your mind for stable, or something that we come after that?
It's something that we actually were talking about at the meeting, at the SIG meeting this past week, is trying to figure out how we can offer an auto-instrumentation in a way that is easy for new users, but also for more advanced users that don't want to enable every plugin or something like that, to have it configurable so that we don't have this huge deployment for every user. Call it an open question for now. But I think we should have something ready, at least in JavaScript, before we go to general availability.
So for the people online, for the people that will look the recording, so it's an open questions. There is a SIG and there is a mailing list and a Gitter room. So drop your feedback there. So we will make over that all together. So yeah, we didn't really to how to get on board as a contributor, or if you have ideas how you can drop. Do you have something to say about that, Dan? So people will know.
I mean, you can easily find us on Gitter. We're at the OpenTelemetry /OpenTelemetry node Gitter channel. I can post a link to it in. Let's see. I need to find the link. I'll post it after I'm done talking here.
Yeah, it's done. I did that.
Oh, perfect. Yes. So there's the Gitter and there's the GitHub, and I mean, any contributions are welcome. Anything from documentation updates to, if you please report it. Like, that's the most important thing, is not that people contribute code, it's that we know when there's a problem, bug or a crash or something, and you don't report it to us, we may not know about it, and how are we gonna fix it if we don't know about it? So just creating issues when you have issues on the GitHub is immensely helpful. And if you're looking for more involvement than that, PR or join the weekly meeting, or even just join the Gitter channel, and any level of involvement at this point is welcomed.
Walter, do you have your question or your consideration for Dan? So here.
Yeah, I have a question about, I know that you have a very long to-do list at this time. My question is about documentation. It is quite a bit difficult to me because I'm very lucky, because Gianluca started me in OpenTelemetry a lot at the first time in order to understand the side project for me. So do you have any plan about the documentation? Is about how we can keep the plugin, everything, keep the plugin aligned, also about the attributes and these kind of things. So, for example, now I have a pull request from another guy. Is asking me to introduce also a debug flag in options in order to the response of the database. I don't know if this is something that is already used as strategy in other plugin or not. So with questions, one about the documentation, another one about how to keep all the plugin at the same level. Any strategy on this?
From a documentation standpoint, we auto-generate documentation for the API. Working on developing more comprehensive documentation for the SDK, which is used to earn instrumentation. But for most users that are not writing plugins, the API documentation is where you should go. So I guess if you're an end user, and if you're looking to work on OpenTelemetry, you're looking for the SDK. And right now, the API documentation is pretty good. The SDK documentation is behind. It's something that we're working on. In terms of keeping plugins, well, I'm not sure that I fully understood what you meant by that, but saying that across all of the languages, we have what we call the semantic conventions, which is base query, span attributes, and they should have this name and this format. And then the next step of that, and it's something that the specification talking about, is actually having readable format and using code generation, build like a span builder library for each document, for each language. You write, say, a database plugin should a generated library that you can say create span or create database span that asks you for each of the attributes that are required for a database span. Like your editor would auto-complete the code and things like that, which should make it easier to make sure that you things that need to be covered be a complete database span. Your question?
Is exactly what I need. If I share my my screen again, the plugin. So if I show my code, these attributes inside spans that are completely custom, made by me. But my guess is this one is if I'm instrumenting a database library, I probably want that all instrumenting database library create almost the same attributes with the same properties when it goes in the error. Otherwise, I see traces from MySQL in a particular way, and the Mongoose library be another thing. And this is exactly what I want to ask. So you reply to my question.
Yeah. So let me actually send you this. You're already way ahead of me. So this is the semantic conventions for database specifically. So if you look through that, it tells you what the attribute names should be, format that they should have, and things like that. And step is to have generated code where your editor would auto-complete those things.
Yep, missed this page. So I have to change it. I have another thing to do on the library. Thanks.
Well, I would hate for you to be bored.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think we don't really have to go to a full hour, because I feel like we already did a good job, and yeah, I'm very happy that you both find the time to share what you are working on and to share how you are, you know, developing skills around tracing and how you are developing